Okay, hi everybody. I'm Nancy. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm a member of the Coral Gables group of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's down south. And I'm glad to be here tonight. And I'm glad you're here too, no matter how you're feeling. If you're feeling really terrible and had a lousy day and things aren't going well and you got a big problem in your life and, you're in the right place. You're absolutely in the right place. And if you're feeling great, you have boundless energy and feel a real connection to a power greater than yourself, we're glad you're here too, because we need that here. You can share that with us. No matter how you feel, you're in the right place. So I am going to talk about step 10 tonight. That's where we found ourselves. Wound all the way through 10. But, I want to start out like I always do, just kind of looking at the progression of the steps in another way. There's this phrase that we use here in AA. We get spiritual tools. I found that very irritating when I first came. What does that mean? What do you? It's like a wrench and a knife. What does that mean? Spiritual tools. But I have a better idea today of what they're actually talking about and what it means as a practical matter. What are we doing here? The steps, as Bill Wilson wrote them, have introduced us to spiritual principles that have been around for thousands of years. What he did, the genius of Alcoholics Anonymous, he packaged them in a way that alcoholics could hear them. They're about alcoholism. Because I know for myself that I've been to a lot of churches. Ever since I was a kid. I went here, I went there. I was always looking for something. And I never heard anything that interested me. I never heard anything that sounded like it had any power until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, it turns out they're saying many of the same things, but they're just made for alcoholics. So, all the spiritual principles that we've learned so far, 1 through 9, we're told that they're transformative. They really are. But what's getting transformed? It's not the world outside. The world outside is still full of wars and atrocities and pestilence and just bad people doing bad things to each other. And our lives are much better when they're sober. I mean, no doubt about it. But they're still subject to problems. We still have financial hardships and illnesses and unexpected accidents and deaths and losses. So, all that suffering is still there. But we learn how to respond differently to it. We don't respond in the same way. And we do that by trying to apply these spiritual tools in our life. So, one way of describing these spiritual tools, they're principles. And when we are able to apply them in our lives, they always lead us out of self. They always lead us on a path that takes us out of our self-centered, self-willed interests. So, what are they when we learn them? First, we learn how to be honest in step 1. And that's really learning how to acknowledge defeat and give up when you can't win, and surrender. Say, I don't have the answers. Very tough thing for most of us to do. I know I learned it for the first time regarding my alcoholism. Couldn't handle it. Only took me 25, 30 years, but I did it. I got there. We learn honesty, without which we can't learn about ourselves. And then the next spiritual tool is hope. We need that to ask for help and not run away and stay put in this fellowship, despite not understanding what it's about. I mean, I came here, I sat down, I was clueless. It was very disturbing to me, really. I thought I was the smartest woman in the world. I couldn't figure out what you guys did here, nor could I figure out how the steps would help anything in my life or why I'd want to do them. But I stayed anyway. It was fortunate for me that I had no place else to go. That helped to motivate me to stay. But really, it takes some hope to stay here despite not understanding what's going to happen. And then, we have to exercise the spiritual tool of faith. Faith in what? We have to look around here and decide that the choices that we have are to go back out where we came from or to try what's here, even though we're doubting that it might do anything for us. And that takes some faith. It does. It takes a decision on our part, and we exercise that faith and decide to see what it's about. I mean, what could it hurt, right? You can always go start drinking again if this thing doesn't work out, but that's faith. And then we start on the start what's hopefully a lifelong habit of trying to look at ourselves. And boy, that takes courage, because I don't know about you, but that's what I tried to avoid my entire life, was getting any honest, useful information about myself. I had lots of information about other people and what they did, and I had labels for everything, and how but about myself, I was amazingly clueless about what made me tick. And so it takes courage. It takes real courage to sit down and take a look at that, and that's what we learn at step 4. Valuable tool. And then in step 5, we learn a little bit about integrity. That's when what we think and what we do and what we say and what we feel is kind of all on the same page, and we learn that by getting more the right size. We take our inventory and share it with someone else, and we find that we're able to get a new perspective on ourselves, on the way we look at ourselves, and on the way we look at our problems, and we're more whole. We become more whole. That integrity is more than honesty. And so then we get to step 6, the workhorse of the steps. Willingness. Sounds pretty mundane, but boy, that's something we need for the rest of our lives. We have to be willing to do what we know is the right thing to do, no matter what. Every day, day in and day out, whether we feel like it, whether we don't, whether we want to, whether we don't, no matter what, whether anybody's watching or not. We have to learn to be able to do the right thing, even if no one else will know, and develop some kind of inner standards. I was always pushed around and motivated by what I thought other people wanted me to do and what I would get from them if I pleased them or got some reward or manipulated them in some way. I had no internal standards. You just had to like me and give me what I want. But we learn in step 6 to create an internal standard and do what we know is right. We often hear that phrase, do the next right thing, no matter what. And boy, does that take willingness. That really takes willingness. Very valuable spiritual principle. And then, after all that hard work, we are asked to develop some humility, which is a practical matter. What that means is giving up our expectations in the outcome of all the good works we've done. We all tend to think, I know I tend to think, if I'm going to do this work, if I'm going to talk to these people that I don't even really like, if I'm going to be helpful and thoughtful and do all this stuff all the time, even, when I'm tired of it and don't feel like it, then my life at least ought to work out the way I want, right? Shouldn't it? Don't you think? And I get mad when it doesn't. But, that's not the way it works. We get to do this work and give up our expectations about the outcome and the way it ought to look and the way people behave and, how it shows up in our life. That's true humility. And that's a spiritual tool. And then the last 2 weeks we've been talking about steps 8 and 9, becoming willing to see other people differently. People who've been problem relationships in our lives, sometimes our entire lives. Really difficult. Very powerful. They affect how we think about ourselves. They affect where we're willing to go. And in order to heal those things, we have to begin to exercise that spiritual tool, that spiritual principle of forgiveness, which requires that we that we become willing to look at other people differently. And that's a very valuable thing too. And then finally, making actual amends to them, taking responsibility for my part in all relationships and making all my relationships as loving as I'm able. That takes discipline. Takes a lot of discipline because it's very easy, to avoid it when nobody else would know. It's very easy to, if we just avoid it, not bother, leave that little blank spot in our lives, skirt around it, do whatever. But after a while, we notice that we don't feel good about ourselves. So we need the discipline to do it, even if we could avoid it. And alcoholics aren't known for their discipline, ever. We don't like long, slow progress. It's boring, and we don't like it. We like instant gratification all the time, right now. And so it's hard to have discipline. But all the things that we felt that we needed when we came in, like self-esteem and self-respect, come through one thing and one thing only, and that's discipline. Discipline, doing the right thing. So those are the spiritual tools that we have. That's what we've learned so far. They're very practical. Not at all what I thought they would be when I came in. I thought they would be, walking around with a prayer book and never having fun, and just I don't know what I thought, but it was stupid. That's what I thought. So when I apply these tools in my life, whenever I can remember to do it, something happens. The transformation begins. So, there's another way to look at this process. And I find it helpful sometimes to look at it that way. I came here and I got very practical advice about how to behave. It didn't make any difference what I thought. Now, think about that. Thank God for that. Because I was not thinking good thoughts when I came in about you, about the fellowship, about, what they were asking me to do. But I did it anyway. So it made no difference what I thought, made no difference what I believed. You're free to have whatever opinion about it you like in the beginning. All that we ask that you do is take the suggestions and begin to behave differently. So the first thing that changed with me and the first thing that changes with newcomers is our behavior. We're asked to begin acting as if other people are worthy of our attention and interest and care. We're asked to behave as if we're responsible adults, which we've never been. But we're to begin to acting as if we're responsible adults. And the amazing thing happens when we begin to do that. The world begins to respond differently to us. It feels a little less hostile, a little less threatening, a little less disappointing. And then I begin to feel a little more trust, a little more interest, a little more encouragement in my life. And so the first thing I changed is my behavior. And through the change in my behavior, the next thing that changes in me is my attitudes. Because the world starts to respond differently to me. I'm not always expecting hostility, attack, and incompetence. Which is how I went through the world before I got here, because I'd gotten different responses to people. I began to get a more thoughtful understanding of other people, and I didn't have as much of a need to be better than or worse than everybody, always comparing myself, and more able to see myself in other people. That was all change in attitude. So first my behaviors changed, then my attitudes changed. And as a result of that, my beliefs began to change. I stopped believing that people were all people were stupid jerks who were in my way. That's pretty much how if I ever thought about it at all, that's how I acted. People were stupid jerks in my way, and I began instead to have the belief that people were damaged, sick, full of fear, suffering from misdirected instincts. Suffering from misperceptions about life, just like me. And as a result of that change in my beliefs, my emotional responses to life changed. And that's really the bottom line. That's really the bottom line for all of us. I was not always reacting from fear and anger. I was more, empowered to choose a better response. Better perception. I had more awareness, more empathy, more understanding, more connection to other people. And so my reactions to life had changed. And that's who I am, my reactions to life as I go out through the world. And life happens. The person I am is my reactions to life. And that's the kind of transformation that goes on here. It's not like we get a lot of money or we, get the best looking partners. Or whatever, those things may happen. But that's not what we're promised here. We're promised a transformation of our perceptions and reactions to life. So, we're able to respond differently to whatever life serves us, whether it's good, bad, or boring. That's all of this is reflected in the Big Book. At the end of steps 8 and 9, we have the promises that are read at the end of most meetings here. And like I just said, we're not promised better jobs or more money or better sex or any of that stuff, more success. We're promised changed states of mind, changed responses to life from changed perceptions. And that's the natural result of spiritual growth. That's what happens when we grow spiritually. So here we are at step 10. I get to decide today, every day, whether there are big events going in my life or whether it's just daily routine activities. I get to decide how I'm going to behave and which life I want. Now, sitting up here tonight with a microphone and a podium and people smiling, and it doesn't seem like that's too tough to figure out. Do I want the life that I have today or the life that I had when I came in? Do I want the head that I have today or the one that I came in? Do I want the perceptions that I have today or the one that I came in? To me, it's not even close. I want what I have today. And so in step 10, what we hear in rooms all the time is if I want to keep this life, I have to keep practicing these principles. So we have step 10, which says that we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 10 is continuity in the practice of applying the principles in my life. And I need to practice until I understand and make a connection that if I'm feeling satisfied and secure and at peace, it's because I'm practicing spiritual principles today. And on the other hand, if I'm feeling dissatisfied and insecure and full of fear and angry and afraid, it's because I'm not practicing spiritual principles today. And practice helps me to make that connection. Living well, the way we need to live, because if we don't live well, our sobriety is in jeopardy. If I'm not feeling good about myself and I'm not feeling good about my life, I'm likely to take the most natural solution to me, which is a drink of alcohol, to change all that perception. And so living well requires work. This is not a one-and-done program. You will hear that sometimes from people from the pro. You don't have to do it first. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, and if they're sober, they're entitled to come and share their experience, strength, and hope with you. My experience, strength, and hope is that this is a way of life. This is a way of life that we begin because we have to, because we have no choice, because we're under the threat of dying from alcoholism. And then gradually, eventually, over time, and without our knowledge and control and permission, a transformation occurs where we want to do it, So this is the step 10, where we deal with today, how I live today. So I don't let all those bad feelings and bad circumstances and bad habits pile up until I'm overwhelmed. Do you remember how overwhelmed you felt when you came in here? I do. I remember how overwhelmed I felt. There was just a whole list of insurmountable problems that I thought would never change. And it's been quite a bit of time, but everything has changed. Everything has changed since I came in. So the 12 and 12 asks us some really good questions about how we live today. It says, can we stay sober, keep emotional balance, live to good purpose under all conditions, even if really hard things happen, and even if really good things happen. Because if good things happen, it's really funny, we human beings. When good things happen to me, I just think I should have more. Good things happen to me. I shouldn't have to do anything to get them. They should I should get more of them, So emotional balance is the key to what the 12 and 12 is talking about there. Very, very interesting idea. What is emotional balance? Emotional balance is a lot of things, and one of them is the ability to look beyond present circumstances. In other words, to look at the bigger picture. Because when I'm having a problem, the way it feels to me is that problem is happening to me and nothing else is happening in the world that day. You and your problems and your life are insignificant. I don't even know they exist. They're out the door. But emotional balance gives us the ability to look at the bigger picture, see the problem in context, see how it might have arisen, see where it might be going. A very, very important skill. Emotional balance allows me to just let go of an unhelpful attitude. And I have plenty of them. But the first thing that happens is I recognize I have an attitude that's not helpful, and I can let it go. That's what emotional balance does for it. It allows us to see something in a different way, or how about just starting it over? I never started anything over before I got here, because like I had an investment. There was me in that thing. Even if it was going south really, really fast, I hung on and went right over the cliff because it was me and my idea and mine. But today I can say, whoa, I don't have to do this anymore. Let me start this over. That's from emotional balance. Emotional balance gives me some insight into my own feelings. And so I can be aware of what makes me angry and what makes me fearful. And that's a really helpful thing to do because that helps me to manage it. I'll get angry, I'll get resentful, and I'll become afraid. But I have a much better idea of why today, and that's a helpful thing to manage it. Emotional balance helps me take bad feelings, which we all have, and keep a check on them until it's appropriate for me to deal with them. So if you do something that makes me angry, I don't have to attack you right that very minute and tell you what I think and what I've always thought about you and your family and what I'd like to happen to you. I don't have to do that. I can take a little break from that and then realize that I'm angry and wonder where that came from. And keeping distressful feelings in check until it's appropriate to deal with them is a very useful thing. A very useful thing that comes from emotional balance. And emotional balance is something that allows me to be direct with people and ask for what I need. And that helps me to live in the solution instead of the problem. So emotional balance is a real gift. It's a real gift of sobriety. So in step 10, we begin to develop the habit of looking at our lives and seeing where we're spiritually deficient, and likewise seeing where we are spiritually sound. And we make a habit of this, of taking a look at ourselves. It's the same thing that we started to do in steps 4 and 5. We learn to look at ourselves and see what our needs are and how we're getting them met, whether it's appropriate. Look at our underlying motives, and identifying our self-centered fear, and then going back and repairing any damage we've done, and then asking how we can be of service or bring something useful to a situation. It's a process and a habit that we create by doing it over and over and over again. And I think that it's a good thing to mention in step 10 that we need to develop a habit of looking at the good in our lives too, and the good we have done, how we are worthy, how we're lovable, how we've improved, because that helps me to develop some gratitude and some appreciation, which I need for some balance in my life. It's not just, we tend to, when we come to A meetings and discuss things, we tend to talk about our problems. But gratitude and appreciation and how we're worthy is just as important if we want some balance in our lives. It's not that we think that we can eliminate our human needs or our human reactions of anger and jealousy and envy and fear and lust. But what the program teaches us is that if we apply it, it makes it totally uncomfortable and unnecessary to stay in those bad emotions for any length of time. They'll always come up, but we don't have to stay there. So the secret to all this, the habit we're asked to develop, is taking an inventory. And there are many different kinds of inventories in the 12 and 12. They talk about a daily inventory at day's end. That's often very useful. Sometimes people take an inventory at the beginning of the day. Okay. A lot of people take an inventory annually on their birthday. It's kind of a ritual thing. Most people will take an inventory when a major issue comes up in their life, like they're in deep shit, like something tough is going on. You'll find most of us scurry for our sponsors and take an inventory then. Some people go on a retreat and take inventories. And if the internet is awash in different kinds of inventories. And if you need to find one, you can find them very easily. But the one that I'm going to talk about tonight is the one that I find most useful. And it's the one that's talked about in our literature, the spot check inventory. How am I living right now? What is happening with me right now? How can I create a very small space between what's happening out there and my reaction to it? And how can I do that? Here's how it works. For me, anyway. Like a situation comes up, and rather than react, I stop and ask myself any one of these questions, and pretty much it doesn't even matter which one it is. It's like, what's my part? What am I doing? What are my motives? What instincts are involved? Am I demanding something that is an offer here? What am I afraid of? That's a great question. How will this affect others? It took me 10 years to learn to ask that question. Is the timing right? Do I have to do this now? Am I procrastinating? How important is it? What's the bigger picture? Is it the right thing to do? Is it the loving thing to do? Any one of those questions will help me when something comes up in my life. And believe me, I do recognize some of us are reactors and some of us are stuffers. I happen to be a stuffer. It could be months before I realize that I'm angry or upset at something. And so it's easier for people like me to not react. But I see somebody like my husband, who's definitely a reactor. I mean, instantly what's going on with him because the veins come out of his neck and he's scary. But he's learned not to do that too. And you pretty much can't help how you're hardwired that way. Each of them has consequences. But if you could just create a little space, it really is a blessing to be able to do that. And if you can't think of a question to ask yourself, call another alcoholic. They'll have plenty of them for you. I'm sure they will. They do. So last of all, one of the most difficult habits for us to develop is that of self-restraint. And they talk a lot about it in the big book. It requires that we create that space, that we think about our selfish motives, that we think about our hidden motives based on self, that we think about the unintended consequences of what we're about to do before we do it, not after we do it. Maybe some of you heard that old joke about practicing self-restraint. It's kind of like that old joke, like remembering the perils of wrestling with a pig. You heard that joke? What happens is that you get very dirty and the pig likes it. And that's what happens when we don't practice self-restraint. You get dirty and they like it. And the truth is that self-restraint does more to repair relationships than 1,000 I'm sorries. It really, really does. So the 12 and 12 says in step 10 that the essence of character building and good living is in that chapter. The chapter itself, chapter 10 in the 12 and 12, is full of instructions. And if you haven't read it recently, You might go back and read it. It's full of instructions on how to live well and how we should live. And if you can't remember anything else about Step 10, there are 2 spiritual ideas that we hear in the rooms all the time that I think embody the 10th step and the principle, the spiritual principle involved. And the first one is, whenever I'm disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with me. Don't even bother to look anywhere else. There's something wrong with me. It took me a long time to understand that. And what it means is, it's not that bad stuff doesn't happen in the world caused by other people. And lots of bad things and bad circumstances beyond my control. What happens is my reaction to it. Whenever I'm disturbed. I'm disturbed. It's my disturbance that I have to look at. Why am I disturbed? And that's what that means. So don't even bother looking anywhere else. The second thing that embodies Step 10 is that I have a daily reprieve. Daily. Based upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition. It's only for today. I may have done this stuff for days, months, weeks, decades. It doesn't matter. If I'm not doing it today, it will not help me today. So sometimes the way I experience this is kind of interesting. I don't know. I have a lot of head chatter. Do you? Any of you do that? My head is always going, and it's like the gerbil wheel, and not a whole lot useful happening up there. Like I'm just minding my own business, but I'm thinking, why does she look like that? What's he going to say next? What do they need me to do? I hate that hairstyle. And it's just like all day long, all this stuff. But today, after years and years and years of trying to make a better habit, sometimes that head chatter includes, what is my part? What do I need to do here? How could I be more loving here? So this is all from practice. It is not my natural inclination to do this. It's just from practice and practice and practice. It is a very useful habit. And it is a very, very powerful habit. And I need good habits. I really do, because, unlike my husband, I'm a complete quitter. I think of my husband, I have this little story about him. It was just amazing to me. I came home one day, I don't know, and he has a big pickup truck. It was in the driveway, and something was wrong with it. And he'd taken out a part, and then another part, and then another part, and then another part. And, half the day was over, and the entire engine was laid out on the driveway in pieces. And, of course, I'm such an encouraging wife. I said to him, hey, man, you better get a shopping cart and put all that shit in there and take it to the dealer, because you're never going to get that back. Never. Took him a couple of days, and his computer and YouTube and all that stuff, and he got the whole damn thing back together again. I could never, ever have done that, ever, because I quit. I'm a quitter if things are too hard. I'm a quitter if I don't think I'm going to look good. I'm a quitter if I think something might not work. I'm a quitter if things get too uncomfortable. I quit. And I know myself pretty well. I've compiled a little list of examples of how I approach life and how I quit. I know what I'll do. I've been in AA for a long time, and every once in a while somebody will offer me a new meditation practice, and I will try it. And I'll last maybe 3 months. I'm good for 3 months. I can do it for 3 months. After that, it's boring. Don't do it anymore. 3 months. A new exercise program. I've been trying those my whole life. I'm good for 3 weeks on those. 3 weeks before I don't see like I look like a different person, and it hasn't had the intended result. So, a new exercise program, 3 weeks. A low carb diet, 3 days. High carb diet, 3 days. Any diet, 3 days. That's me. I quit after 3 days because, that hasn't worked. I'm always making resolutions about profanity and gossip and sarcasm, and I'm good for that for about 24 hours. And, I've been around long enough. I do make resolutions about practicing loving kindness. I'm good for that for about 20 minutes. And then, last but not least, resolutions to withhold judgment. Now, I can do that for as long as it takes to finish the thought. And then I can't do it anymore. So I'm a quitter, and I need good habits. I need good habits. I need to practice this over and over and over again. You know, when life is not going well, it is very easy, and we often just want to throw up our hands in despair and run away. And there are many, many ways to run away. It's not always just running down the street. Alcohol, we all know, is one of them. Overwork is one. You know, all kinds of electronic devices help us to run away. Getting too busy. Lots of things help us run away. And we become discouraged and depressed. And we feel like victims. And we forget that we have a choice here. We have a choice. Therefore, I need this spiritual principle. I really need the spiritual principle, continuity of action, or perseverance. The definition of perseverance, I really like it. It is a steadfastness, which is a fabulous word. Steadfastness in a course of action despite difficulty, delay, or encouragement. Steadfastness. What this step means is it really doesn't matter if I fall short. It doesn't matter if I fail entirely. It doesn't matter if I regress or disappoint myself or other people. It doesn't matter if my efforts are unnoticed, unappreciated, ineffective. It doesn't matter if I go off in the wrong direction. It doesn't matter if I make a big mess. It doesn't matter if I screw it up. This spiritual principle, step 10, says I can just stop and start over again right where I find myself. I don't quit. I don't ever quit. I don't ever, ever, ever quit. We don't quit. And it is a process, and it requires practice. Now think about it. Anything that you've practiced in your life, anything at all, what we use and practice grows stronger in our lives. And what we ignore becomes weaker in our lives. And finally, if we ignore it long enough, it starts to diminish until it has no energy at all left. So practice is the key to living a life grounded in spiritual truth. So, you know, what this step tells us is no matter what happens, no matter what doesn't happen, whether it's good, whether it's bad, or just plain ordinary, we just start again. We practice better behavior. We practice spiritual principles. We just keep on keeping on. And I think it's really the trudge part of our program. So I have another minute or two. I have a vast collection of quotes. I don't read them all the time because they get old. But I have a couple on step 10 that I really like. The first one is Winston Churchill. He's a favorite of mine. And you can hear him saying this about step 10. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. That's Winston Churchill. Now, there was an author named James Michener. I'm old enough to have read a bunch of his books. Maybe you're not. He wrote very interesting books. But I like what he said. Character consists of what you do on the third or fourth try. You know, after you've screwed it up once or twice. Then I'm a fan of Albert Einstein. He said, "It's not that I'm so smart. It's just that I stay with problems longer." And I like to remember that. And then I'll just kind of end this part of the meeting with an unknown author. It says, difficult things take a long time, but impossible things just take a little longer. So that's all I have on step 10, and I want to thank you very much for listening to me tonight.
Thank you, Nancy. Jan, I forgot you again. Is there anything you'd like to share?
Everybody alcoholic and Jan. Tradition 7 is every AA group are supporting declining outside contributions.
Thank you so much. Okay, and Ray is going to pass the basket in accordance with our 7th tradition. And I need a volunteer to do the chips. Anybody out there? All right. And we have directions.
Oh, thank you. Alcoholic Kelly, In South Florida, and I think around most of the world, there's a chip system. The first chip is the white chip. It's to give up the fight and pick up a white chip tonight. Most important one. Anybody? All right, keep coming back. Is there anyone with 3 months? That's red. 3 months, 90 days. Okay. Let's keep coming back. 6 months is blue. Big book blue. Okay, keep coming back. And yellow is 9 months. Anyone with 9 months? Okay. Is there anyone celebrating an AA anniversary today? This week? Or this month? Yes.
1 year.
All right.
6 of this one.
All right. Someone else out there? Someone else?
I'm Marcia, I'm an alcoholic, and I have 21 years. All right.
Hi, Marcia. All right. Congratulations, everybody. Suggestions are get a big book, get a sponsor, do 90-90, work the steps, find a higher power. And if you didn't drink tonight, give yourself a hand.
Ed is up.
Alcoholic Ed. The AA Promises from page 83 and 84 of the Big Book. We are painstaking about this phase of our development. We will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor will we wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? They are being fulfilled among us. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And could we please thank Nancy one more time? And we have a great way of closing.
Ms. Marcia, would you please take us out?
Thank you so much. I love
Thank you too. See you later, hon.
I hope so. I look forward to it. Very strong point to try to cut here. Stephanie, the last one we made was 4 of them. Really, I mean, they made an effort to get some of the topics. Very good. It's good to see you.
Sharon, tell you that.